We are here today with Elliah Heifetz. He is, as his album is titled, a first generation American. And he has made quite a few hints on the album that people pronounce his name hilariously wrong. So tell me, what do you usually get?
The pronunciations are usually what? Elijah, Elias. I had one math teacher for an entire year, no matter how many times I corrected him, call me Eli in high school. That was a new one, but the most egregious, probably by a mile, is when I email people and they respond to me and they say, "Hi, Elijah," because then they must think that I spelled my name wrong in my email address, and that for as long as I've had an email address, I've been emailing with the wrong spelling. I signed my email wrong, all of it. So that's for me. That's the most like really.
Hang on. Hang on. Sorry.
Okay.
We might have to restart. I have a relatively new laptop. I have to figure
Mm.
out how to make my text messages not make noise.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay, let's see if that helps. Sorry about this.
Totally fine.
All right, we are here today with Elliah Heifetz. We just got interrupted by some noises. So now we're going to try again. No, I shouldn't say that. We are here today with Elliah Heifetz. He is, as his album title would indicate, a first generation American. He also hints on the album that people pronounce his name wrong quite often. So, Elliot, what do you usually get?
Well, usually out loud, I'll get like an Elia, Elijah, whatever. But the worst is definitely when I email somebody new and they respond to me, "Hi, Elijah," putting a J into my name, because that implies they think that I've been misspelling my own name in my email address for as long as I've had an email. So that's definitely the one that actually gets under my skin.
So, I would have gone with Elia, just.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. It's one of those things where if you're saying it out loud and you get it wrong, it doesn't bother me. It's just when somebody looks at the spelling and decides that I'm wrong.
Oh, I get it all the time. I have the three first name syndrome, first, middle,
Mm,
last name. So when someone asks me for my last name and I hand them my very first name sounding last name, they're like,
mm.
"No, your last name." No, that is my last name.
Yeah, it's like a
I
game of who's
know.
on first.
I take offense to them thinking I don't know which one of my names is my last
Oh
name.
my gosh, you're right. I gave you my middle name. Sorry.
So now to be serious and actually
Yeah.
talk about the album. So where did your parents come from and where did you guys wind up settling?
Yeah, so my parents came from Riga, Latvia, which at the time was part of the former Soviet Union. And they settled in Philadelphia because of a much longer story for possibly another time, but an insane reunion between two long lost sisters that didn't see each other after World War One that only occurred in the 1970s that led to my family meeting our sort of distant third cousin branch family that had settled in Philadelphia. And so at the time there was this whole process for immigration coming from the Soviet Union, filing as a refugee, you needed sponsorship. So because of the presence of the family in Philadelphia, it made sense to move there.
And how is it different growing up as a first generation American?
Well, um, it's different from a few things. It's different than growing up as an immigrant yourself, for sure, because I think, well, and maybe this depends. Like, if I had been born within a month of my parents moving, maybe I would have a different perspective on this. But because I was born 3 years later, and they had already begun the process of assimilation, um, and very shortly after I was born, we left the little Russian neighborhood that I was where we were living when I was born. So it was definitely different from an immigrant experience because I didn't know the language as well, right? The foreign language, right? I wasn't as familiar with the other culture. Culturally, my brain was being conditioned from birth to be American, right? Uh, surrounded by all the things that are indicators of American culture and not of Latvian or Soviet or Russian culture. And the only source of that for myself was at home. I think if I had been an immigrant in some way, I would have had the first several years or many years of my life in a different country, a totally different mindset, right? So I was, from the jump, I had an American mindset, an American perspective. That said, because my family were immigrants and because we spoke a different language at home and because there was different food in my fridge and I didn't know how to, I still don't know how to throw a football, but I certainly didn't even touch a football until, probably 10 years later than the average kid should, and all these various things. I was very much the odd one out in that respect too. So I think a lot of first generation Americans that I've talked to have experienced this as well, where you're kind of like only one foot in one world and only one foot in the other world. And you're sort of made to feel like you're not quite either.
Well, in your defense, I still can't throw a football.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think a lot of people can't catch it, let alone throw it, but that
Yeah,
probably has nothing to do with how American they are.
fair enough. All right, well, so I'll put it in a different way. When I was in second grade, my mom got free tickets through her work to take us to go see the Philadelphia Phillies, who were really good at the time. I'd never seen a baseball game in my life, and I didn't know what baseball was. But I don't know if you're familiar with Philadelphia sports fans. They're very drunk and very angry. And I very loudly turned to my mom, probably second or third inning at one point, and just said, "Mom, I'm bored." And a group of angry, grown, red-faced men just turn around and are glaring at my mom like, "Get this kid out of here." So that maybe that's more emblematic of my relationship with American sports. Even as a fan, I just didn't get it. I grew up playing soccer, and that was the extent of it.
So, how how many things did you pick up on from your Latvian parents in terms of that culture?
Well, one thing to note for sure is that the the culture had been very Russified, um, and my parents were born into Soviet Latvia, so it's really like general wider Soviet Russian culture that I feel like I picked up on, and less so Latvian culture, which is really distinct and beautiful. And the Baltics have their own history that has ties to Germany and all kinds of other things, and Scandinavia and whatever. But I would say largely I picked up on the Russian side. So um, both in like my first language was Russian, um, and I think I can trace back my love of lyrics and just the way they sound, the way that language can rhyme with it, all these different things, I think really does come from the fact that when I was a little kid first learning English, all I was hearing at first was the sounds. And I was introduced to language in general in a different tongue. So when it came to English, I was like, wow, this is so beautiful, you know? And I think that's really stuck with me. I think I've also picked up, and this is maybe more generalized immigrant mentality thing, but I think like my parents have instilled in me a really deep sense of like, you know, Russian ruthlessness, if you will, in terms of just like if you want something, you got to go take it, and no one's going to hand it to you. And if you're thinking, oh, like, should I speak up or should I? Maybe they'll notice me or whatever in a situation. You always have to speak up, or else, like I said, no one's going to just call on you. And that definitely is, I think, a mix of both an immigrant mentality and a very kind of like brusque Eastern European attitude. And then when it comes to the food, I mean, I eat dairy like no one else. Like cottage cheese, farmer's cheese, blintzes. Like in food culinarily, I feel like, smoked fish, salted fish, all that kind of stuff. So culinarily actually is maybe my number one influence.
What do you know about what your parents experienced behind the Iron Curtain?
A good amount by this point. Just from talking to them about it and hearing stories all my life, and yeah, it definitely a fair amount. It seemed like it was pretty rough, to be honest.
Give me something.
Yeah, like my dad uh, was a like rising musician, and his dad and his dad and his dad for centuries were musicians. But um, he would get opportunities and then it literally have them retracted because they found out he was Jewish. Um, you know, my parents were forced to live. You can't get your own place, right? The Soviet Union assigns you to a place, and usually what that means is when you get married, you move in with one of the parents. So they were living in this tiny, horrible. I've seen it. I've been to the building in later years. This rundown apartment with like my mom, my dad's mom, my dad's dad, who was still waking up at like 3 a.m. with PTSD after the Holocaust, like screaming, waking up everyone in the house, and my older sister who was born at the time. And they were all in a 1-bedroom apartment with like no hot water. And, we're talking like you go to the dentist, and unless they're doing anything really invasive, no anesthetic. You know what I mean? Even if the you go to this is the classic example, but like you want to get a quart of milk, good luck. You're going to be in line for an hour. Just fully around 2 blocks because the supply is so limited. Um, and not to say there weren't good things, but the discrimination against Jews and really any religions got really intense. My dad was almost arrested a couple times, um, just for playing music, certain kinds of music. He actually like was an underground jazz and avant-garde Jewish musician who would like, yeah, this is really getting into it, but they would turn churches into museums of atheism under the Soviet Union. So he would then go after hours and play concerts like underground at these museums of atheism that were music that was outlawed. And if they had gotten caught, that would be the end for them. I'm a bit rambly right now, but I definitely feel like I picked up a lot from them, and life was not as comfortable or full of possibility as it is here for sure.
So, did your father stick with music after he came here?
Yeah. He is a professor at a college near where we live in. My parents live in Philadelphia, and has been a part of like a klezmer groups, chamber groups. I mean, it's tough, like you can be the biggest musician in Latvia and then come to America and say, oh, well, I was such and such in Latvia. And most Americans will go, where? Yeah, I would say 8 out of 10 people that I tell where my family are from are like, where's that? I haven't even heard of that. Is that Lithuania? No, I said a different country than Lithuania. I did not mean Lithuania, or Estonia or whatever. So I think it's tough and it's been hard for sure, having that kind of career transferred. You know, I was the first person in my family, my dad's side of history, to have the choice not to be a musician because I was born here, and with how difficult it was to be one, my parents were sort of like, to me, they said, do anything else, do whatever you want to do, anything. Being a musician is so hard. You don't have to do that in America, like you would have had to if you were born in the old country, so to speak. So, and obviously I messed up.
You rebelled by
Conforming.
really, really interesting one there.
Yeah, right.
What about your mother? How did she wind up fitting in here?
She had a slightly different experience. She went to an English speaking school in Riga. So, um, she had learned and a technical college. So she had picked up skills that were a lot more transferable to the economy in the United States in 1990. I mean, it didn't make that much of a difference. She still was working well under minimum wage for a horrible, abusive boss under the table who was like super shady and corrupt, way overtime. 6 year old daughter, and trying to move her mom, my dad's mom, over, and the only person in the family at the time who actually spoke English. And they had a total of $20 to their name when they came, and my dad was like looking for work as a musician. This job that she had, which was so shitty, was really the only source of income. So she had some advantages, but also, uh, in you know, a very very difficult time. Despite all of that, they opened some doors and slammed some others shut. If that makes sense.
So, what is it about your relationship with your mother that led you to write a song honoring her?
Well, I mean, my relation. It's not like I could have and will and actually have in various points written a song about my dad, my sister, and whatever. It's not so much. I wouldn't want to say that like our relationship is in any way like greater than or different. It was more that like I think I the way that she had to shoulder a lot of the burden being the only English speaker. And that's that lyric, her second tongue was English, but her first, really around that. And the way that like she was younger. My dad is 9 years older than my mom, which is a normal thing in the Soviet Union. But now when I tell my parents, what if I was dating someone 9 years younger than me? They'd be like, we would come slap you. But, so my mom was like in her mid 20s, younger than I am now, with or late, what she was 27, which is still younger than I am now. And she had a 6 year old daughter. And that's just really unique. I mean, it made her it made her more of like an American folk hero. The way that like roots songs and folk songs and all these, John Henry and all these old American classic hero songs about these great figures. Um, the position that I know she was in and that she sort of soldiered through felt to me really akin to a lot of those songs. I wanted to make sure that she had a song, and any immigrant mother like her had a song that celebrated them as an American folk hero.
Very beautiful. Let's hear Living Proof, and we will be right back.